Welcome to the Great Loop Radio podcast, brought to you by America's Great Loop Cruisers Association. We're dedicated to sharing Great Loop information and inspiration with those actively cruising, planning for, or dreaming about a Great Loop adventure. I'm Kim Russo. I'm the director of AGLCA. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the things available to you through AGLCA, and we'll tell you a little bit more about what is available to anyone and also the things that we keep just for our members. This was actually suggested by Julie Shea. She's our member services coordinator, and she talks to a lot of people who have questions about membership. So we're going to try and answer those for you today. Before we jump in, I want to take a moment to recognize and thank our Admiral sponsors who support AGLCA at the highest level. They are Great Loop Yacht Sales, Passage Makers Trawler Fest, Skipper Bob Publications, and Waterway Guide Media. As always, we encourage our listeners and viewers to support these businesses that support the Great Loop. And with that out of the way, I'd like to welcome Karen Nettles back to the Great Loop Radio podcast. She's with the Homeport crew, and she's going to kind of help me go through some of the things available from AGLCA.
Yeah, always glad to be here.
And I always appreciate it.
And like you said, Julie always gets a lot of questions and so forth. So why don't we start off with, what does AGLCA offer non-members to begin with?
Yeah, and AGLCA puts out really a lot of content about the Great Loop, and our members put out a lot of content too. But first of all, this podcast. So this is coming to you free of charge, no membership required from AGLCA. That said, if you appreciate this podcast, joining is a way to get even more information and more in-depth details about the topics that we discuss. But in addition to this podcast, we have a YouTube channel that, of course, is available to anyone. It's youtube.com/greatloop. And we've got lots of videos there. We, of course, post this video there every week. Although I know a lot of you consume this as a true podcast, audio only, the video of our conversation is always up there. And we also we get some comments that, it would be great if there were some video or pictures to go along with this instead of just watching me and our guests talk. And we've generally kept it to what you're seeing and what you're hearing now. And we know that's because this is a podcast and most of you consume this as audio only. So we've avoided putting any visuals to it because we know a lot of you will be missing some things if we do that. But the YouTube channel does show this, but there's also several playlists on our YouTube channel. One has flyover views of the route itself, leg by leg. One of the playlists is, we call it Great Loop Lifestyle, but it's basically some of the things to see and do at some of the stops along the way that are easy walking distance from marinas because we're all arriving without transportation. The frequently asked questions on the greatloop.org website is definitely a great resource for those of you who are new to the idea of the Great Loop. It literally is the most frequently asked questions that we're asked all the time, and we see them repeatedly on social media, and they're all there for you under the frequently asked questions on our website. So that is available to anyone. We also on the greatloop.org website have an interactive map that shows the Great Loop route. So there's lots of route choices. There's lots of side trips. Right now, the route that is shown is just kind of the most basic of the options. We will be adding additional route choices as time goes by. But you can zoom in and see exactly where the route goes. We get lots of questions about that. And also on that map, you can see the locations of AGLCA sponsors. And you can see the best of the loop designations from our members. And those are, some of their top things that they did or visited on the loop. And all that is outside of the member wall. So anyone who is wanting to can browse those. And then finally, we added maybe a year or so ago a page for those who are searching for their Great Loop boat, because we know that includes many of you. And it's just a page that kind of, we compiled all of the different resources that we offer for finding the boat and put it in one place. So if you're on the greatloop.org website, you can go to, you'll see a button about halfway down the page for searching for your Great Loop boat, and all the details are there, including statistics on the last few years of loop completions. So average size boat, top 10 boat makes that completed the Great Loop in that year. And that's not at all to say that you must do the Great Loop on that average size boat, or you must do the Great Loop on one of those top 10. It's just kind of a guide for those who don't know where to start to give them some ideas of what boats are popular and what might be a good starting point for things to look at. So there's probably more out there that I'm forgetting about, but those in a nutshell are kind of all of the free things available to anyone. And I guess one of the main things I forgot is social media. Um, Facebook.com/groups/the Great Loop is our public Great Loop group. It's got over 150,000 people in it, but it's a pretty active discussion. I guess when we talk about the things that we reserve just for members, we'll talk a little bit more about Facebook, but I think that about covers it for what we make available to anyone who's interested.
Yeah, and that's a lot of resources. But for those that do choose to join, can you tell us a little bit about the general information that's available for those that are in the planning stages?
Yeah, and we certainly understand that, we kind of categorize loopers into three different stages in the journey. There are those who are still planning, there are those who are actively doing the Great Loop, and there are those who have finished the Great Loop. And those all intersect and intertwine, and it's kind of hard sometimes to categorize people into one of those groups because a lot of people fit into multiple. But one of the main things for those who are still planning is our discussion forum. And the reason I say that that's important for people that are still planning is it is a very robust, in-depth discussion about lots of different things about the Great Loop. And as a planner, you can ask your questions and get answers from those who have been there and done that and want to share the experience. But it's also a great place to just kind of observe. If you're in the early stages, don't hesitate to ask a question, but you may not know what to ask. So what happens in the forum, and since the Great Loop is somewhat seasonal, you're of course in the Great Lakes in the summer, and kind of in the southern portion of the route in the winter, a lot of the questions tend to repeat every year around the same time. So as a planner, just kind of observing and reading the forum to see what's going on, you're going to absorb a ton of information that way. So that's one resource that we reserve just for our members. We also added, probably almost a year ago now, we added a Facebook group for AGLCA members only. And we did that because that public group had grown to be so large. And we know that most of the people there haven't done the loop because there haven't been that many people who've completed the loop. And the discussion tends to get a little bit like what you'd see anywhere on social media in a group that's large. Not everybody is kind and courteous, and loopers by and large are probably the most kind, courteous, sharing of information, supportive group of anybody I've ever met. So when we started to see the discussion there not focusing on supporting each other, we really decided it was time to have a members only Facebook group. That one's got about 2,000 members, and it's a great place to do what Facebook is best at, which is share information, share pictures, kind of share the journey. The forum is great for taking a deeper dive, and the Facebook page is great for, kind of the quick updates and the quick questions. So members use both. The interactive map that I mentioned, while that is viewable by anyone, there are additional details that are reserved for members only. And one of those is seeing harbor host contact information. Harbor hosts are AGLCA members who are supporting other members by offering assistance when those other members are coming through their home port. So if you're not familiar with the program, if you were to arrive in any particular spot along the Great Loop and needed assistance, needed a dentist, needed a dog groomer, needed a haircut for yourself, wanted to know what there is to see and do here, those are what the harbor hosts do. You can reach out to them, get local information. Many of them go above and beyond by offering rides for provisions and other things. So there's about 600 harbor hosts around the Great Loop, and they are reserved for members only. So as a member, you can go to the interactive map, you can see the nearest harbor host, and you can actually get their contact information. You can also see the discounts on our interactive map or from our sponsor directory. As a member, when you tap on a sponsor from the interactive map, you will see if they are offering a discount to AGLCA members. And sometimes that's an amount off dockage, sometimes it's amount off fuel. Lots of different things that are offered as discounts by our sponsors, and that is reserved for members only. Webinars on our website. We've got a whole series of webinars. I think there's probably 25 or more. And those are available to members only. And they cover everything from navigating certain portions of the Great Loop route to general topics for the loop, like anchoring or marine electronics or weather for information for crossing the Gulf of Mexico. So all of the little pieces of information that as you're planning, you're going to want to gather are all there for you. And then recently we've added a virtual DocTales series, which is just a social interaction time, but we do focus it on specific topics. So once a month, for the past few months, and we'll be taking a break for November and December, but the virtual DocTales series has 5 different topics each month, and you get your choice of which of those 5 topics you'd like to attend. And we do it on Zoom. It's pretty much a social interaction, but to discuss a specific topic related to the Great Loop. So if you're a member and you're interested, or you're not, and that sounds good to you, the October one is coming up at the end of the month, and the details are on the website now. So for planners, those are kind of the big things. It's the ways to engage. It's the way to start figuring out the route, the way to start getting answers to the questions maybe you didn't even know to ask.
Okay, well, speaking of, planning the route and so forth, what's available for those that are wanting to, really drill down and plan their stops and so forth?
Yeah, so that's that's kind of the next level planning, and a lot of that part of planning may be happening while you're already on the loop. It's pretty challenging to plan the entire 6,000 miles before you even leave the dock. So some of this planning may happen as you're underway and looking ahead to what's coming next. But the interactive map I mentioned has kind of the best of that can help you decide where you want to go. And for members only, we have a segments area of the website that breaks the Great Loop into, I think it's about 8 different segments. For each segment, you get an overview of the segment, kind of how many miles, any little intricacies, things you should expect that are unique to that segment. And then you get considerate skills and other considerations that you should master or be ready for before you tackle that particular segment. So things that come up year after year in the forum, we've moved so that it's not time-based, but rather geographical. So for example, for Florida, every year there's a discussion about the Florida temporary registration, also known as a sojourner's permit, that you need if you're going to stay in Florida more than 90 days and your boat is not previously registered in Florida. There's a few different little parameters, and that's why it's there. There's always lots of questions about that. For the Florida segment, as an example, again, it also talks about the concept of a slow pass. And if you don't know what that is, you're certainly going to want to read up on that before you get to some of the intracoastal waterway kind of narrower segments of the Great Loop. But just different considerations like that. There's actually a online course you are supposed to take to be able to cruise through the Everglades National Park area, which if you're going to the Keys is probably you're going to be in that area. So all those considerations for that segment are also listed there. You also get sample itineraries. And I always like to add a caveat to that. It is one boat's sample itinerary. It happens to be my boat because that was the one I could provide accurate information on for the stops that we made. Everybody needs to make the Great Loop their own. So these are not at all suggested stops. They're not even probably the stops I would necessarily make if I was retired and had the luxury of spending as much time as I wanted anywhere. But since we both work, we did it our way, which is what we encourage from everybody. But so it's a guideline. It is not at all intended to be, these are the stops that are required for the Great Loop. But for each of those legs, there are also GPX files that you can download and load to your own navigation software as a planning tool. So again, this would kind of be a lot to take on to do the whole 6,000 miles, but you can certainly review it beforehand as you're planning. And then these segment areas were basically designed so that a little bit before you're getting ready to head into that next segment, go back to it, review it, make sure the special skills and considerations have been covered, etc. The other planning tool that's great for people who are actually, in the details of planning is Waterway Guide, and they offer a discount to our members as well that you'll find in our sponsor directory. So Waterway Guide and Skipper Bob, these are books that are great tools for planning and doing, and you'll find the discount there, and it's a pretty substantial discount for our members. And then the other thing that is useful when you're planning is our resource library. we are approaching 1,000 different resources, individual things that are available to members on the website. There's a search there. You can filter by different types of resources, so videos versus podcasts versus articles. So if you're getting ready to visit Charleston, for example, you can type Charleston into the search and look at what resources are available about it. And that also includes harbor guides. A lot of our harbor hosts have provided harbor guides. That's kind of a written look at visiting their area. So again, for planners, it can help you make that decision on which stops you'd like to make while you're doing your loop.
Well, certainly a lot of planning information is available. Without given all that information that's there, what would seem to be the ideal time for somebody to join AGLCA?
Yeah, I would say, and everybody's different, but I would say a year to 2 years before you plan to head out. The earlier you join, the more you're going to be absorbing that information from the forum and have time to, at your leisure, kind of review everything that's available to you. I still like to call all of our new members if they have, given permission to call in their profile. And so often I talk to people who are about to leave and I think, gosh, you missed a lot of opportunity there. Compared to those who join a year or two out. And again, as I mentioned, the information's cyclical. So the questions we're seeing and discussing right now about the river system, where most loopers are probably going to come up again this time next year. So if you're leaving next year, by being a member now, you're getting access to all of those different things ahead of time. So you kind of know what to expect and know what to plan for. So why don't we go ahead and take a quick break and play a message from one of our sponsors? And when we come back, I think we'll jump a little bit more into what's available to those who are in progress. So we'll be back in a moment.
Good morning, loopers. Many of you are probably already cruising in southeastern waters, and that is where the Salty Southeast Cruisers Net focuses all of its efforts to help you enjoy your time on the water. So as you prepare for the next leg of your journey, and as your resource for accurate, timely, and useful information, we want to invite you to use and add your knowledge to the wealth of information that's available through the Cruisers Net in its directories for marinas, bridges, and anchorages, as well as the latest fuel prices in your area. Our mission of Cruisers Helping Cruisers, may we invite you to help those following in your wake by sharing with us your cruising experiences. Thank you. Have a great day.
Hello, loopers. We're a cross-country boat transport, a power and sailboat transport company based in Minnesota. We are partnering with Crowley's Yacht Yard and Skyway Yacht Works in Chicago, Illinois, as well as Turner Marine in Mobile, Alabama, and Rick Zern at Pelican's Perch in Pensacola, Florida, for mast transport. We also stop in Grand Rivers, Kentucky, Iuka, Mississippi, and other spots along the way. If you're looking for a simple option for getting your mast down south without having to trip over it for the next couple of months, give us a call or send an email. 651-437-2454 or molly@crosscountryboat.com. We have the last load of masts and booms scheduled for the week of October 21st. Please reach out to us as soon as possible if you want your mast shipped south. We'd hate to miss anyone. We look forward to talking with you. Cheers. We're back on the Great Loop Radio podcast. My guest today is Karen Nettles from the Homeport Crew, and she is helping me walk through all of the many resources available through AGLCA, both for those of you who are not yet members and those who already are. So Karen, where did we leave off?
Well, you covered everything that was available for those that are in the planning stages, but can you tell us what membership offers for those that are already in progress?
Sure. So in progress, and as I said, these lines between planning and in progress tend to blur, but in progress is definitely who the harbor host information is intended for, because you're rarely going to plan ahead what harbor hosts you might contact because you don't know where you'll be needing something. So the harbor hosts definitely meant for in progress loopers primarily. And again, the interactive map is the easiest way to find them because you know where you are geographically, but you might not know the names of the towns around you to search by that. So you just pop up the map, you can zoom in on where you are, and visually you can see the ring buoy markers for the harbor hosts and find the ones nearest you. And there are multiple harbor hosts in some places, which is great because it just means that if one's not available or doesn't know the answer, there's another one you can reach out to. So that's on the map. The other thing is the map as you're in progress. Our interactive map shows you sponsor marinas, which again, opportunities for discounts at a lot of them. The segments area we talked about that it's kind of intended while you're in progress for you to be looking ahead at the next segment and what is there. The Burgee, of course, is for members only, but flying the Burgee, the Burgee's been called better than a puppy for meeting new people. And it's been called the welcome mat for loopers. So it identifies you, it'll kind of create instant relationships. And then of course, people in progress are relying on Nebo, which is a third-party app that we have partnered with, but it is a way for members to find each other and gather kind of real-time information on the waterways. So Nebo does a ton of other things too, but one of the ways it's a huge benefit to in-progress members is that you can see where other AGLCA members are. Our members are marked with our Burgee. And, so for example, if you're considering an anchorage for tomorrow night, but you're not really sure about it, you can look on Nebo and see perhaps if there's somebody there tonight. And you can reach out to them and ask them, how is the holding? Is it shoaled in on the entrance? Get all the details that you need. We used it on our loop when we were underway for things like, if there was a free wall coming up and we weren't sure if there was still going to be room for us because it was late in the day, we could see who was already there and reach out to them and get real-time information on, hey, is there enough room for a 42-footer? That kind of thing. And it's also great for arranging things like docktails. So being shown as a looper in Nebo gives you a lot of information and opens up a lot of doors. So once you're in progress, definitely recommend that. And then our rendezvous. The fall rendezvous is coming up in a few weeks. One of the tracks at the rendezvous is our route briefing. So it's detailed navigation information on how to do the Great Loop, where to go, what to look out for, potential challenges to navigation, anchorages, marinas, all of the things that you need to be able to navigate the Great Loop. So that's kind of what we offer to those who are in progress. And everything that the planners get, of course, the in-progress loopers get too. It just becomes a little bit less important on some of those things when you're already underway.
Right, of course. And then we also have our other loopers, which are our gold loopers, those who have completed the route. So why do they stay involved with AGLCA?
Loopers are a really tight-knit community, and I think a lot of our gold loopers, it's a hard thing to just walk away from when you finish the loop. So we do have a lot that stay involved. They contribute by answering questions in the forum and in the Facebook group. Many of them return to our events as speakers. Many of them contribute articles to the Great Loop Link. E-magazine, which is one of the benefits I didn't even mention yet, is our monthly e-magazine. And many gold loopers continue to serve by being harbor hosts. We also have a gold looper reunion for them every year. So like I said, it's just a tight-knit community that's hard to just terminate your relationship with when you finish the loop. So many choose to stay involved.
Yeah, and then, like I said, the association certainly benefits from that, and a lot of that is at events. And speaking of events, you've kind of briefly talked about events and the different importance of it in the different stages of looping. So can you tell us what the event calendar for 2025 looks like?
I can, and I did mention our last event of 2024 is our fall rendezvous. And what I didn't mention, I probably should have mentioned that as a great opportunity for planners too, because our looper crawls allow you to board several different boats. A lot of the 50 or so boats that we typically have in the harbor will open for others to board in the afternoons. So it's a great chance to see lots of looper boats in a small amount of time in one place and see what they're like when people are living on them. So if you don't know what boat you want yet, our rendezvous are pretty popular for that. So planners, and again, rendezvous are members only events. But for 2025, we are having Looper Palooza, January 28th through 30th in Punta Gorda, Florida. That will be similar to a rendezvous, but we will not have looper crawls because there's just not enough dockage in Southwest Florida for any marina to be able to give us the number of slips we would need. So Looper Palooza, as I said, very much like a rendezvous, but no looper crawls. There'll be two tracks going on. One is the route briefing I already mentioned. The other is a Looping 101 track that is more kind of geared towards planners. It's things like anchoring, marine electronics, tablet navigation, weather resources, etc. So that is a members only event. And as I said, January 28th through 30th. Registration generally opens for all of these events 90 days before them. So we should be opening the Looperpalooza registration with all the details on our website at the end of October. In March, we will have one of our Looper lifestyle seminars in Chattanooga. We are still finalizing the details on the dates, so we're not giving those just yet. But a Looper lifestyle seminar is typically run over 2 days. It's usually half a day the first day and the full day the second day. And that is geared towards people who are kind of early in the process. It is not a members only event, but registration does come with membership. So either if you are not a member, you get your membership as part of your registration, or if you are a member, we extend your membership because you've registered. So, and that usually the Looper lifestyle sessions encompass how to find and buy a Great Loop boat, and also cover things like financing and insurance. And then we cover a lot of the planning information and bring in gold loopers, which is anyone who's completed the route. We bring in a few gold loopers to kind of tell the story of their loop. So you can interact with people who have done the entire route and find out more about what it's really like. May, our spring rendezvous will return to Norfolk, Virginia. That's in early May, usually the first week in May. We are planning a Looper lifestyle session for September 2025. Details on that are still being worked on. And then, of course, we'll have our annual fall rendezvous. So for 2025, we're looking at 2 rendezvous, spring and fall, 1 Looperpalooza in January, and 2 Looper lifestyle sessions, March and September.
So plenty of events for everybody to come and participate in some way, shape, or form. And speaking of events, we were dealt a really difficult blow recently when one of our regular speakers passed away suddenly. Can you tell us a little about that and how that's going to impact future events?
Yeah, we are absolutely heartbroken at the passing of David Fuller. He was on this podcast just a few weeks ago. And that was recorded it was released a few days before he passed. It was recorded right before he went on a trip. So we are saddened by that. He is irreplaceable. And he generally was presenting, 2 to 3, sometimes 4 times at our events. So we have filled the holes in the fall rendezvous agenda. But going forward, part of what that means is, and we're always looking for new speakers, always kind of looking for that next generation of speakers. So if you have, extensive experience on a part of the Great Loop route, or if you have extensive experience on a planning type topic like anchoring, and you enjoy public speaking and are comfortable with public speaking, as I said, we're always looking to cultivate that next generation of speakers. So you can reach out to me at krusso@greatloop.org. That's KRUSSO@greatloop.org. And we can add you to our speakers roster.
Okay. Like I said, we're always looking for speakers and always looking for topics too. So speaking of topics, if listeners would like to suggest a topic for this podcast, how do they do that?
Yeah, we greatly appreciate suggestions. And we get a lot of good feedback about this podcast, but one of the hardest things is coming up with topics. We are next year, we'll be starting season 14 of this podcast. So we've been at it for a while. Sometimes we can duplicate a topic because it's been long enough and information may change. But we would love to hear your thoughts on topics for this podcast. We can't always make them happen, but we would love to hear your suggestions. So again, you can email me with those. It's krusso@greatloop.org.
I think we've kind of given a good overview of what membership is. I think those that may have not have joined, I guess one obvious thing, maybe people want to know what the price is. What's the investment to join AGLCA?
It's actually really affordable considering what you get. There is a one-time joining fee of $15, and then the annual dues, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, Karen, I think it's $84. Is that right?
79.
See, thank you, Karen. $79 per year. And if you join for 2 or 3 years, it is discounted. So if you're a couple years out and we've shown you what is available as a planner and you want to join for 2 or 3 years, it works out per year to less than the 79 that Karen mentioned. So I guess it's 94 the first year with that $15 fee. So thank you for correcting me on that, Karen. Yeah, but the more the merrier. It's a great group of people, and it's all about the connections that you will make with other loopers. So thank you for listening, and thank you for joining us. And Karen, thanks for being with us again.
Sure.
Thanks to everyone who's watched or listened. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Great Loop Radio podcast. Until then, safe cruising.